Olá, bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Parar para Vender. Hoje vamos receber a Arnisa Aliqkaj para nos falar sobre negociação com neurociência e é sempre um prazer receber especialistas, neste caso vindas do Kosovo, da Pristina. Portanto, bem-vinda, Arnisa. Welcome, Arnisa. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic receiving you. You know, I like you very much. You are a fascinating person that I met this year, and it is an honor to receive you in my podcast.
Thank you so much. It is an honor for me too.
Of course. Arnisa, do you want to present yourself?
Yes, of course, with pleasure. So my name is Arnisa Aliqkaj. I'm an organizational psychologist, and I try to offer services that are related to the evidence of neuroscience, because that is an evidence that we cannot fake. So this is where my services and my work is mostly focused on. I have also had the chance to collaborate with my professor, Ruben Carvajal, to actually publish our study on subconscious and conscious decision-making process and leadership. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the neuroscience of the negotiation process and see if I can actually help you and the people that are watching this podcast.
Thanks a lot, Arnisa. I always like to tell the audience how I met the guests. And well, you were my teacher in a workshop in a neurobusiness school, and I was fascinated with your classes, with your workshop, and I decided to invite you to start to follow your job. Well, it's very important to use neuroscience in sales and commercials subjects. So, Arnisa, if you can explain us, what does neuroscience teach us about how the human brain makes decisions, especially in a negotiation situation?
With pleasure. So, our decision making is a process that happens all the time, and there are always two very important functions involved. It is our logical reasoning, but also our emotional responses. Many people have the tendency to think that when we make decisions, especially when we are negotiating about something, we only have to use our logic and our reasoning. Mm-hmm. In our luck, our brain does not work that way. When we make decision, we will certainly always have the emotional component. And I will also explain why this is important. So let me first talk about the brain parts that are responsible for the logical part and the emotional part. So first we have our prefrontal cortex that is responsible for our logical reasoning, for our planning, for our ability to analyze options. And together with the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, we are able to evaluate choices, whether it is based on past experiences or the current goals that we have. So this is what I can tell you about the brain parts related to logical reasoning. But when we are thinking about our emotional responses of decision making, then we have the limbic system, specifically our amygdala and our hippocampus. Our amygdala is this bean-shaped small part of our brain that is also known as the fear center. However, it does much more than just assess fear. The amygdala is important for our emotional processing, and the hippocampus is important for our memory. So we remember if something has been dangerous or good for us in the past, and our amygdala has an easier way of deciding whether we have to seek safety or whether this is not a dangerous situation. Now, let's imagine if we had only one or the other. If we only had logical reasoning for decision making, we would take a lot of time to actually make a decision, because we would analyze and overanalyze any possible outcome, and we would not be able to make decisions in a timely manner, and this would then cost us. But if we only make decisions based on our emotions, that would mean that we would only try to seek what is safe for us right now. We would not take risks that can benefit us potentially later, but we would only focus on what is helping us right now. So these are the brain parts, and these are the functions that are important when we make decisions. Now, when we are negotiating with people, it is important to know that we need a balance between emotions and logic. And there are ways to achieve this. If we are personally stressed during the negotiating process, or if our counterpart is stressed, there are things that we can do to reduce the dominance of what the amygdala is doing to our body, because the amygdala has this tendency to bring the blood flow to our most vital organs, because we are thinking about surviving when we are stressed. It is a natural response. It is not our enemy in any way. It is just a natural response. If we are creating an environment, if we are using a good tone, if we are choosing our words carefully, we can signal to our own brain, but also to the brain of our to the person that we are talking to, that this is a safe space. This is not a space of danger in any way. There is no danger in front of us, and therefore our bodies, but also the body of our counterpart, can stabilize, can go back to the homeostasis. And other than the brain parts, we also have our neurotransmitters that play a very important role when it comes to decision making. So it's not just these brain parts. We also have neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, who play a very vital roles when it comes to decision making, because dopamine is associated with reward, with anticipation of or a preference formation. So if we have already done something good for our counterpart, just giving them a pen when they needed one, there's already this tendency to see, okay, they are anticipating a preference for us. And serotonin is the neurotransmitter that influences mood. It influences our social behavior. And this is when we can make use of really showing them respect. So we can light up their serotonin in the brain when we are showing respect, when we are taking them, letting them take the lead. And all of these together, combined with us calming their amygdala, helping them produce dopamine and serotonin, can help us have better negotiating outcomes. But also any kind of dysfunction in this neurotransmitter circuits can impair decision making, not just in terms of negotiating, but in terms of everyday life. So when we think about all the knowledge that we have on decision making, this is what we can do in a very nutshell in order to have better negotiating outcomes.
Okay. Arnisa, you talk about serotonin, but I was thinking, for instance, people that like to negotiate based on fear, for instance. they will produce not serotonin, but cortisol, right? When you are negotiating based on fear, you aren't building rapport, you aren't building trust. So how can we use neuroscience to build the trust?
Yes, so it is true what you said. In moments where we are experiencing stress, our body produces more cortisol, because cortisol helps our body use what we have of sugar and what we have of fat in order to turn it to energy, because that's when our brain gets into a state of fight or flight response. In order to prevent something like this, it is very important to build rapport and trust with the counterpart that we are talking to. So trust is fundamentally about taking a calculated risk. So when we decide to trust someone, we take a chance on their behavior, whether it is related to physical, emotional, or financial stakes. It can be anything in negotiating. Our brains are, however, constantly assessing risks. And here comes the role of the prefrontal cortex again. So the prefrontal cortex was important for decision making, especially because of logic reasoning. And one of the things it does, it evaluates risks and rewards, especially when we are meeting new people. So these regions are lit up when we are assessing trustworthiness of other people. But how is our prefrontal cortex able to assess this? This is something we should know. Body language. If we see a body language that is open, that is calm, we do not perceive threat. We have more like tendency to think that that person is trustworthy. We see facial expressions. We read the emotions out of facial expression. If that person is resonating joy, resonating happiness to see us, we know this is not a situation of threat. This is a situation of respect. When their tone is positive, and a lot of other cues that we can assess, not just by verbal things, but also nonverbal cues, are things that help our prefrontal cortex assess whether we are in a risky situation or a situation where we can trust somebody. So it helps us with risk perception and decision making, but also impulse control. It is important that we are controlling our impulses during negotiation. And this is also a role that the prefrontal cortex has. But maybe one of the most important components of trust that are lately being discussed is a neurotransmitter called oxytocin. Oxytocin has many names. It has the name of the hug hormone, the love hormone, the trust hormone. So it has many names because oxytocin gets released when we have social bonding, when we have a sense of trust to other people. It also is the hormone that helps us establish intimacy. It helps us establish connection. It helps us reduce stress even. It increases cooperation. So oxytocin can be considered as the trust hormone because it gets released in these types of behaviors and these types of situations. Next to oxytocin, dopamine again plays a role in trust because of the positive interaction that we have with another person. It increases dopamine, and this reinforces the connection and also motivates us to engage further with that person. So with all of this knowledge regarding the prefrontal cortex, the oxytocin, the dopamine, what is it that we can do in a negotiating setting in order to make use of this knowledge that we have about the brain? We can start from the really small things, and it is really important for us to start at the small things because it's usually these subconscious things that make us have the best experience. We can start from addressing physical needs, offering a glass of water, offering a cup of coffee, setting a relaxed tone, allowing both parties to feel safe. So keep this in mind. I am constantly telling about the feeling of feeling safe. So it is very important to never feel at threat, never feel
Okay.
have the sense of threat while we are negotiating. And another thing would be mirroring body language. Even if you are meeting with your counterpart online, it is very beneficial if you are mirroring their body language, because it can show genuine interest, it can help reduce defensiveness, and it gives a sense that you are the same. You do not have this, you are outside of my group, but you are inside of my group. Also maintaining eye contact, smiling while talking, engaging with open-ended questions instead of closed-ended questions. Like, instead of asking, are you good today? You just ask, how have you been today? You don't want an answer that says yes or no. You want
Of
an
course.
answer that explains something more.
Open questions.
Exactly. And it is also important to find common ground, because then you demonstrate that you have the same value. It builds trust. You listen with empathy. It increases understanding and respect, and you create joint goals and objectives. All of this will light up oxytocin, will light up dopamine, and you will more likely have the, I don't want to say the upper hand, because at the end of the day, negotiation is about a win-win situation, but you will certainly do what's right with the information that you have.
Okay. I used to say, probably we move on in the stairs until the close of the sale, because we needed to climb some stairs. It's not immediately to close a negotiation. You talk about the neurotransmitters, but I remember about the concept. It is mirror neurons. We can apply this concept to generate empathy too, right?
Yes, this is very true. Mirror neurons are associated with two very important things. The first one is learning. It helps our ability to learn. And the second thing is it helps our ability to be empathetic towards others. Mirror neurons are cells in the brain, and they fire when an individual performs an action and we observe someone else perform the same action. So when we see someone smile, for example, our mirror neurons fire in a way where we internally mimic that action. So it's not just about something physical happening that we are mimicking inside of our head, but also a smile, a joy, a feeling gets mimicked inside of our brain when we see somebody else do it. Some people have the ability to do this more than others. So these neurons are therefore crucial for learning and empathy, because when we observe other people's behavior, we subconsciously simulate their actions. And this aids to us not just learning a new skill, but also being more empathetic to what they are feeling. So in negotiating, mirroring actually can play quite a powerful role, because by very subtly mimicking the counterpart's body language and actions, like not very like when they do this, you do this, but very subtly, then there is a chance for you to mimic their mirror neurons. And this is when you create a sense of mutual understanding and rapport. So what happens is that the chance for reduced tension increases, you foster more cooperation, you make the negotiation more collaborative, less confrontational. You are able to better diffuse tension during difficult moments. So generally speaking, mirror neurons are considered to be a phenomenon that is part of a more broader concept known as interpersonal neurobiology. And it emphasizes how emotional regulation between individuals, or this co-regulation between individuals, is mediated by these neural connections that we have. And when we mirror each other's behaviors, we align our emotional states, and this leads to generally smoother communication and therefore a better or more successful negotiation.
Yes, I always like to explain the mirror neurons with, in Portugal, we say that yawning is transmissible. So I like to say it's not a disease, it's the mirror neurons working.
That is a good example.
Arnisa, well, in the negotiations, there are some monsters that people are afraid. That monsters have a name, and their name are objections. People that are negotiating are fear from objections. And well, neuroscience, how can you help us with these monsters?
Well, this is a great question, and I like the fact that you put emphasis that the objection is the monster, not our reaction to it, because this is something I really like to emphasize. When we are faced with conflicts, it is our normal, natural reaction to react defensively. So I really like for people to know that when our amygdala gets triggered, our amygdala is not our enemy. Our amygdala has this natural response because it's trying to keep us alive. It has tried to keep us alive for years, and here we are because we have this response. However, not always are we in a situation of fight or flight, even though we perceive it to be that way. So when we are dealing with objections, it is normal that we are getting defensive. This is why we need to try to calm down our amygdala and engage more of our prefrontal cortex. How do we do that? Now, it really depends on if we are having second thoughts before the negotiation or during the negotiation. Maybe I should focus more on doing. Let's say the objection is happening there and now. There are some ways to help our amygdala shut down. Not shut down, never. That's not what we want to do, but just calm down in order for us to get back to our cognitive balance. What we do is first talk to ourselves, to really tell ourselves that this is not a dangerous situation. We are not at any risk. We are not dying. We can literally use these words. They work. Our brain needs to hear that. Our brain needs to know that we are aware that we are not in danger. Another thing that one of my professors has taught me during the Neuroleadership Masters, it was Luis Santamaria. He told us that one thing we can do is massage our saliva glands, or think that we are eating a lemon, because this makes our mouth produce more saliva. And when we produce more saliva, our brain thinks that we are going to eat something. And when we are going to eat something, there is no way that we are in danger. So our brain will know, wait, there is no danger here for us because we are about to eat. So these are some of the ways that we can calm our amygdala, also counting from 10 to 1, but it really depends how much attention you can give to your thoughts and what the counterpart is saying. So these are very small things we can do during the confrontation, within the negotiation, in order to calm ourselves and in order to not react with emotions, which can do not benefit our negotiating. But if we want to calm ourselves before the negotiation process, there are also other things that we can do. We can use grounding techniques like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. We can use box breathing techniques. We can use muscle relaxation techniques. So all of these things have the role of reminding our amygdala that we are not in danger. This is an important thing that we have to do for ourselves. And also don't forget that if we enter that room calm and ready and steady, chances are that we are going to project that to our counterpart, and they will feel the same from us because of the mirror neurons that we mentioned before. Another thing that we can do when we are dealing with objections is not just acknowledging our own emotions. It's also acknowledging the emotions of our counterparts. And it really is no bad idea to ask them about how they are feeling and what happened for them to feel in a negative way. So this happens, when this happens, we are trying to create understanding. We are trying to foster collaboration. And this is one way to help prevent any possible emotional escalation. It is okay to to show genuine empathy. It is okay to show genuine curiosity in order to de-escalate the situation. It also shows that we have a problem-solving approach. So we are not focusing on fighting you. We are focusing on finding a problem and solving it. And another thing that we can do that can be very subtle, but it can help us, is overcoming the us versus them mentality. And we do this by not saying, I think idea A is better because, but you can say, if we consider idea A, this can bring a better outcome. So you are not saying me, I, but you are saying us, we, and this subconsciously make them feel like they are not us and them, but we are a joint group working together.
They are part of the solution.
Yes.
Okay. Very, very interesting. Well, we talk about the solutions, but what are the most common mistakes people make in negotiations? Of course, thinking in a neuroscience perspective.
There are quite some mistakes that people tend to make, and they don't just necessarily happen in negotiation, but they are as relevant as in negotiation and other settings in our everyday lives. So I already talked about how important emotional control is. So people not preparing for any emotional regulation is something I would consider a mistake, because we need to avoid emotional impulsivity when we are going to a negotiation. How do we do this prior to the negotiation? Because I am always going to emphasize that for any negotiation, to avoid these mistakes, we need to prepare. How do we prepare for emotional control? One way would be to recognize our emotional triggers, and it must be quite some time to actually understand what our emotional triggers are. So the sooner we start writing down any emotional trigger that we have and what is triggering that, can help us become aware of that emotional trigger and can help us be prepared if something similar happens during the negotiation. Another thing that we can do would also just be maintaining a broader view. So just taking perspective before going to the negotiation. Think of all the perspectives, even maybe the worst scenario outcome, so that you are training your brain that things may not go the way you want it to, but at least you are prepared for that. And one thing that is not necessarily easy to overcome are our cognitive biases or our cognitive shortcuts, because in a way they help us. They help us because we use the information that we need there and now, but long-term cognitive biases and cognitive shortcuts, they do not necessarily help us. So what are these mistakes of cognitive bias? One is confirmation bias. This means that we as a negotiator are only focusing on the information that supports what we already believe in. This does not let us be open-minded. This does not let us explore the mutuality of beneficial solutions for all of the parties. And in order for this, in order to not make this mistake, it is important that we get aware of this. We as human beings have confirmation bias. It's normal. It's okay. We have them. It is
confirmation bias. It is the same of the halo effect. Trying to
you
seek the
say
information
the
that
Yeah, it is also a bias, because the first information that we get for a person, we tend on perceiving that person again based on that first information. That is also a bias. That is right. And one thing that we can do is, in regards to confirmation bias, is to recognize this not only when we are doing it, but try to also recognize when our counterpart is trying to make a decision. And the cognitive shortcuts on which we fall on are usually things like when we are negotiating about our wage, about a new job, a wage, we focus on the wage. We want to get the most money we can from that job, but we don't really think about other information that is important to our job satisfaction, like the commute, the hours that it takes for us to go to work. So these shortcuts, even though they seem beneficial at the time for here and now, they are not necessarily beneficial on the long run. So it is important that as a negotiator, you are aware that you have these biases and you learn how to overcome them. Another mistake I would like to emphasize, also I don't like that I'm calling it mistake, but I hope that's okay, is that we do not use enough of storytelling in negotiation. Imagine that you are literally transporting your counterpart mentally and emotionally to how your proposal is meeting with their goals. Now, storytelling is something that if you don't do it during a negotiation, you are doing a mistake. Then there are other things I already mentioned, not using nonverbal communication, focusing on competition rather than collaborating, not using active listening, and so on and so forth. There is also, by the way, a thing called cherry picking. It happens in negotiation when we have already negotiated on some, let's say, packages or parts of what we are negotiating about, and at the end, right when we are about to close the negotiation, the counterpart tells us that they want to change something in one of the packages that is just a small detail that somebody from the company requested, and we as humans have a natural tendency, okay, let's not jeopardize this, let's just say, okay, we are already at the end, let's go with it. This is not a good idea, because we have not negotiated unless we have negotiated everything. So just because you're at the end, it should be important that the process of negotiations should be more important to you rather than the length of the negotiation. So cherry picking doesn't happen. How can we prevent all of these mistakes? I would suggest that preparation of everything that I mentioned right now is number one, and we can create a preparation checklist. We should allocate enough time before going into the negotiation. And just like we do with job interviews when we were younger, or we still do, like when we talk to ourselves in the mirror, or with a parent, or with a sibling, or with a friend, we can do mock negotiations, even with people that we know, with ourselves, just to see how they are reacting and what we are reacting. Because if we don't plan, we plan to fail.
Yes, that's true. There's a book about negotiation. It is Getting to Yes, from Roger Fish and William Hurry. And they said that 80% of good successful negotiation, 80%, it's in preparation. Yes. I remember that statistics about the focus that you put. Arnisa, you remember me? You remember me when you talk about the storytelling in a negotiation, and I remember a method, a tool that Apple created to deal with objections, and it is feel, felt, found. I don't know if you already heard about this tool created by Apple. And they use the storytelling for the objections with this tool. And when somebody presents you an objection, first you feel, okay, I understand how you feel. Then felt, I have a customer that felt the same way. Found, but they found that after using our product, they have these results. So they are using the storytelling, Apple, and how important it is.
So you are asking me how important?
No, I'm telling you, I'm showing you that there is a tool that Apple uses to deal with objections. Feel, felt, found.
That is very interesting. I'm going to look into it.
Okay. I will share you some information. Well, talking about the negotiation, there is a thing that neuroscience like to explain, and it is the loss aversion. So, how does neuroscience explain a loss aversion, and how can you use this knowledge in the negotiation?
Loss aversion is quite interesting because it really shows us how our brain has the tendency of being more sensitive to what we are likely to lose rather than what we are likely to gain. It is a biological response, and it leads individuals to avoid risky decisions and seek safety. Now, individuals tend to avoid risk even when there is potential gain, because they are scared of taking the risk now. They want to avoid risk, especially if we are talking about a financial loss. For example, if the laptop that I right now have in front of me breaks and I need to buy a new laptop, I see that there is a used laptop with a lower price and there is a new laptop with a higher price. In order to not lose a lot of money, I maybe buy the used laptop. But on the long run, this may not be the best solution, because I have bought for a lower price a used laptop that might also break in a shorter time. So although we have this mechanism to prevent us from making risky decisions, it does not always benefit us. However, a lot of industries make use of this brain's sensitivity of loss, especially in marketing. Like, marketers use a lot of tactics, limited time offers, rebates, loyalty programs, and they also use scarcity, urgency phrases like, this is a limited time offer, only a few items left, and so on. And also when we think, for example, about insurance companies, they make big use of loss aversion, because insurance companies, they rely on loss aversion because they emphasize an unlikely but costly outcome, and it triggers a sense of fear, and it prompts us as humans to purchase coverage for peace of mind. So loss aversion is a natural human tendency. It helps us avoid incurring losses, but on the long run, it may not always be the best idea. So what can we do as negotiators when we feel that our counterpart is using loss aversion against us? It can happen. And one thing to consider, to take into consideration, is framing. How are they framing their words when they are giving us their proposal? Are they only using telling us about what we might lose, telling us about how this might cost us if we don't take their offer? And we can also become mindful ourselves of what is happening, but also make sure that we do not use loss aversion necessarily, but we frame what's positive when we give our counter offer, because we want to raise their dopamine, and raising their dopamine might be better than using loss aversion when we try to gain from a negotiation. And also another thing that might help us is just putting the loss into perspective. To tackle loss aversion, there's a very simple technique. We can ask ourselves, what's the worst case scenario if this decision is made? So by putting the loss into perspective, we can assess whether it's truly worth the fear or the discomfort it triggers, because sometimes it really is not worth that fear or discomfort. And this mental exercise can allow us to rationalize our decision and better handle the situation that involves a potential risk. By the way, there are also AI technologies that play a role in kind of mitigating this bias, because it helps provide objective, data-driven decision-making support so that we do not allow our loss aversion make the decision for us.
Okay, that's great. And I think it's always important that we try to see the ideas, the environment in different perspectives. It is very important in negotiation. Well, we have already talked about the neurotransmitters. You talk about the serotonin, you talk about the oxytocin, and well, you talk a little about the dopamine. Okay? Dopamine, it's like we think in dopamine when we think about the goals, but in negotiations, what is the role of the dopamine?
The dopamine is also sometimes referred to as a feel-good neurotransmitter. So when we are producing dopamine, it means something that is happening is making us feel good. Is it a reward? Is it a pleasurable experience? So it is therefore also central to decision making and motivation. When we anticipate a reward, a positive outcome, it gets released, and it therefore reinforces behavior that lead to perceived success and reward, making it essential for reinforcing positive decision processes. So we are more likely to want to do something again if dopamine was released during that time when we did something like that. But how do we use dopamine or maybe even other neurotransmitters for negotiation? In negotiation, skilled negotiators can actually effectively tap into the brain's dopamine system by emphasizing potential rewards that will benefit all of the parties involved, by framing the proposal in a way where we talk about what there is to gain. When we can also increase the cooperation and enhance motivation when we do this, especially because dopamine gets released when we are highlighting the gains. And this cooperative mindset can lead to a more successful negotiating. But also focusing on mutual success, showing that you are focusing on their emotional or social success, that can also stimulate dopamine to release. So it's not just about the negotiation itself, about the offer itself. It's also about showing how you are emotionally and how you are caring emotionally and socially for them. This also helps release dopamine and therefore supports the negotiation process. But also other neurotransmitters are important for negotiation, like serotonin and oxytocin. I already talked about them, but maybe just a few more just examples maybe would be important.
I think it is important.
Yeah. So when we're talking about serotonin, we know it's important for our mood regulation. It helps us remain calm, act less impulsively. It is very crucial for reducing our anxiety and stress. How do we support our counterpart in this case? How do we ensure they are producing a good amount of serotonin? Now, I cannot guarantee 100% that anything works, but this is how brains are wired. There's always outliers. But one thing would be to acknowledge their value, to make them feel respected, to encourage them to lead. If you ask questions, if you ask their perspective, if you tell them that their experience is bringing a lot to the table, you are acting like I don't want to, probably like a pill to really raise their serotonin levels. All of these things make people have higher serotonin, producing higher serotonin. And when it comes to oxytocin, we already talked about it. It is the trust hormone, and it strengthens when we create social bonds. So everything that we already talked about, talking about mutual benefit, mirroring our body language, trying to find collaborative and creative solution, can also enhance the levels of oxytocin in our counterpart's brain, and therefore contributing to a better negotiation outcome.
Okay. I think that's an important thing to say to the audience, to the people that are listening to us, and it is this tools, this knowledge that you are sharing with everybody, it's not a magical that it will work in every situations. It will increase your success rate, but it's not working in all the situations. And it's important to say, because there are some negotiations that we are going to deal, and there are some episodes that it's important that we don't close that negotiation. It's important for us and important for the other customers. So what are the, tell me, Arnisa.
I just wanted to say you put it very good.
Okay, Arnisa. I have a good master thesis. That's where I learned it. Arnisa, what are the most effective strategies for influencing a customer decision based, of course, on neuroscience?
So I would say, besides everything that I already mentioned, I probably should also mention two very important things, and that would be the use of visuals and also the attention grabbing. So I didn't mention attention before, but it can be a very effective strategy of influencing decision making. So why is this important? Now, our emotions get evoked and they activate in our brain's limbic system. And this system is important for our emotional processing. Why is this important? One of the most important parts of the limbic system is our hippocampus that is related to our long-term memory. So we want to send messages. We want to have visuals that are impactful and memorable. Otherwise, we don't remember it. And in the context of negotiation, what we need to do in terms for our limbic system to really grasp the information that we are giving, we can present the information in smaller and digestible pieces in order to prevent cognitive load. Because our working memory of the information that we get, it has a limited capacity. And we don't want to overload it, because then when we have cognitive overload, we are not able to negotiate the best way that we could. But before any visual or any information gets into the memory of our negotiator or any human, actually, we need to grab that person's attention. Attention is a critical factor of how we evaluate choices, how we make decisions, how we make decision also in a negotiating setting, because our attention is fluctuating between different options, and the more options there are, the more difficult it is for us to make a choice. So if we are, for example, negotiating for a product, it is best to not show all of the products that we are, but maybe based on what we already know about the counterpart, we show them a product with a certain color, with a certain familiarity to that person, so that they have less options to choose from, but those options also evoke something in them emotionally. So simplify the options, provide context. This is what the brain prefers when we are doing a choice, or we are comparing two things or three things in order to make a choice. And one other thing that we can use to grab attention is also to not hide the testimonials, to share relatable client experience. So everything that shows how credible we are, what expertise we have, is a good way of supporting a positive outcome of our negotiation. And another thing that is used especially in neuromarketing, because now my brain switched to product, is the use of multisensory engagement. So when we want to grab attention, it's usually often happening through sight and through sound, because we are seeing the product and we are hearing the counterpart tell us about it. But what if we offer something more? What if we allow the client to touch the product? What if we allow the client to smell the product? If it's something eatable, to eat the product? So all of this, the more senses are used, the more our hippocampus will remember. This will grab our attention, this will grab our memory, this will make us likely make a choice pro to that product. So these are, in a nutshell, together with other things that I mentioned priorly, that we can do to successfully close a negotiation with a counterpart.
Okay, so I think we can resume saying keep it simple and use all the senses that you can. And sometimes probably it's not, how can I say, it's not easy to put the customer, put the product in her nose to smell it. But if you use words that go to that kind of sense, the brain functions will be the same. So it is very, very important, Arnisa.
That is true.
In this moment, we just have 8 minutes to finish our conversation, and the time is flying very quickly. So it's time, if the persons that are listening us, if they want to put all the questions that they want. So while people are thinking about the questions they are putting or some doubts that they have, I would talk about your company.
Okay.
So you have a company. I'm going to share the link in a LinkedIn about your company. Put here. And I'm going to share to, one moment. Oops, I'm sorry. Oh, it's here. Let's share the screen. One moment. While you talk about the service that you have, can you explain us?
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity, Eduardo. So Myelin OPS is the company that I started working in, or better say, it is my own company that I started working in March of this year. So for all of you who don't know, myelin is a very important part of the brain neurons. So without myelin, the neurons cannot communicate effectively, and therefore also the brain wouldn't work. So how I decided to name the company Myelin is that the brain are the company, the neurons are the employees, and myelin are our services, because the services that we offer are services of organizational psychology. So we want to foster better working environments where mental health at the workplace is fostered, always based on neuroscientific evidence. And with these services, we want to create better communication between teams, better leadership development, and general environment or a positive working culture. So this, in a nutshell, is what we are trying to do with Myelin OPS. This is why also the company is called Myelin. OPS means Organizational Psychology Services. We are based in Kosovo, Pristina. We work with companies as well as with individuals. And so this is what we do in a nutshell.
Okay. And you just work in Kosovo with your company, or worldwide?
Actually, the services that we provide are worldwide. We are based in Kosovo, but the services that we offer are professional services that are relevant or can be relevant to companies outside of Kosovo.
Okay, so companies from Portugal, Brazil, and Spain that probably are listening us. I encourage you to contact Arnisa to put your communication better between the employees with the neuroscience. In the neuroscience, like we see and like we are listening here, it is very important to get all these informations.
Thank you
Arnisa,
very much.
I think you are a great communicator. People don't get, I think, don't get any doubt or probably are a little shy. I just have one more question to you, and I would like to know your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Can neuroscience help us identify if the other counterpart, if someone is being honest or dishonest in a negotiation?
I would say that there is like no definitive neurological marker for honesty, but there are certain brain-based cues that can offer us an insight to deceptive behavior. For example, when a person is lying, or when we are lying in general, we have to remember our lie and we can forget it. Or just the cognitive load of remembering the lie can give us this overload where our brain needs to work harder to maintain this falsehood. And this can manifest in different ways. We can maybe show hesitation in speech. We can show inconsistencies in speech and inconsistencies in the story. And we can also demonstrate behavioral changes like avoiding eye contact, fidgeting like on the seat or with our feet, or having a closed body posture. However, all of these things can also mean something else. So this does not necessarily mean that the person is lying. There are these brain-based cues that can give us a hint that something is not right. Together with our gut feeling, we might understand whether we are dealing with somebody that is lying or just somebody that is stressed. But there are brain parts that are related to us making choices based on what's honest and making choices based on what we choose because of our personal benefit. Because a study that was done in Yale, they were giving people like a game where they had to make choices, and the choices were either wrong choices or deceitful choices, but that benefited themselves, or honest choices. And people that had damage to the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex were people that tended to choose deceitful choices, but that benefited their own selves. So we know that there are brain-based cues and like parts that are related to deceitfulness and to trustworthiness, but I cannot give you a definitive neurological marker for honesty. It's difficult.
Well, I think people that are listening us, I want to say that if you have a bad memory like me, it's better don't be dishonest in negotiations or not lie in negotiations. Arnisa, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yes, it's a double pleasure. It's a pleasure for you, it's a pleasure for me, and I'm sure people are enjoying, and well, I will expect all the reviews that they are putting after this. Arnisa, I wanted to thank you to be here. I love these online meetings and the possibility that the technology brings us, because I don't believe that in another way we have the possibility to have a meeting and a conversation between Portugal and Kosovo.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, technology.
Yes, Arnisa, thank you a lot. Don't go away. I'm just say goodbye to the audience. Okay, Arnisa?
Okay.
Just one moment.
Bye, audience. Thank you for joining.
Bem, pessoal, eu quero vos agradecer imenso a vossa presença aqui. Hoje a conversa com a Arnisa foi fantástica. Ela é uma excelente comunicadora, tem um grande conhecimento sobre tudo o que é neurociência. E, olhem, eu vou-vos depois fazer chegar, vou escrever um artigo no LinkedIn sobre um resumo de todas estas dicas que a Arnisa deixou-nos hoje. E, olhem, aguardem, porque o próximo episódio também vai ser excelente. Conto convosco. Por favor, partilhem o podcast, partilhem o episódio, a comunidade continua a crescer e espero que assim evolua. Muito obrigado.